Hello, and welcome to STEAM of Consciousness, a program presented by the ARI Podcasting Network and hosted by George Koperna. What is STEAM? STEAM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Art, and Mathematics. During each episode, we will take a few minutes to sit down with professionals in different STEAM-related fields to give them an opportunity to share their story and give their perspectives with the goal of promoting career awareness to potentially interested students, young professionals, and of course, anyone else who shares a fascination with these areas of study. And now, please join us as we tap into the STEAM of Consciousness.
Welcome to the STEAM of Consciousness podcast, a presentation of the ARI Podcasting Network. I'm George Koperna, and I'm really happy to be here with Professor Anna Herring today. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Anna, you're an assistant professor at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville in environmental engineering. Is that right?
Yep. I'm in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, but my expertise is definitely on the environmental side.
Great. What does that day-to-day look like for you?
Yeah. So as an assistant professor, I teach one class a semester. So in the fall, I teach a graduate course. In the spring, which is now, I'm teaching an undergraduate course. So I teach an hour a day on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then there's obviously some prep associated with that. I have a cohort of graduate students who I supervise. So I have 4 PhD students, 3 undergraduate researchers who are working in my group. So I spend a lot of time with them, sometimes in the lab, sometimes just in my office talking through different problems or results that they have. And then I do try to spend some time when I can find it on my own research, reading papers, trying to stay up to date on the current state of research, and doing my own thinking about, new ideas that I want to try to pursue.
That's great. And I understand you have a PhD in environmental engineering. So when you were little, Anna, was that what you wanted to be when you grew up?
No, I think when I was very young, I wanted to be an archaeologist. Yeah, I grew up in Colorado, on the western slope of Colorado, so on the western side of the Rockies. And it is sort of in this region where we were still quite close to the mountains, but you're also transitioning into the desert areas. So I was close to Dinosaur National Monument. I was close to like Arches National Monument. And I always really liked, going into those places. And there is a lot of, old historic rock art and stuff like that, which I always found really fascinating when I was a kid. So when I was a kid, I was always drawn to those kind of spaces and the outdoors and stuff like that. So
I haven't been to all of those places, but I have been to the Dinosaur Trail out near Red Rocks. So all super cool.
Yeah.
But what changed that? Was it in high school? What did you plan to go to college to be an archaeologist? What was the defining moment there?
Ooh, I don't know if there was one defining moment, but I guess in general, as I got older, I got more of an understanding of, I guess, the community that I grew up in and the reliance of the entire country actually on energy production. So I grew up in a small town called Craig, Colorado. It's a community that was really built around coal energy production. So there's a very large coal power plant in Craig, Colorado. There's several different coal mines that are in the area nearby. My dad is a coal miner, or he was a coal miner before he retired. And the entire community was really supported by the coal industry. But also, that community supported the electricity and the energy that fueled a lot of not necessarily the nearby areas, but we sent energy out into the country everywhere. And so I think it was kind of the recognition of the necessity and the importance of the energy industry, both locally and also to the broader U.S. community, but also juxtaposed with all of these natural spaces that I really, really loved and enjoyed and appreciated. growing up nearby. So it was kind of the intersection of those two aspects of my life, I think, that led me to go towards environmental engineering. So when I was choosing a major, I saw environmental engineering as an opportunity to try to, I guess, find compromises between, energy production, but also environmental protection. So that was the main goal there, I think.
Neat. So when you were in high school, you already sort of figured out, I want to be an environmental engineer. And so you were canvassing colleges for that program. So, you know, not to bury the lead, you ended up going to Colorado, which isn't that far away, but how broadly did you look? Did you have some resources that kind of helped guide you to Colorado as a choice?
I did apply to several universities out of state. I also applied to universities in state in Colorado. Yeah, I'm the first person in my family to have graduated from college. My dad did go to the School of Mines, Colorado School of Mines, for a couple of semesters, but he didn't end up actually graduating from that institution before he went into the workforce. And so I had a little bit of information from my dad about, what his experience was like in college, but otherwise, my immediate family, we didn't have a lot of experience with that. And so I think when I was first applying to universities, when I was a high school student, I was just kind of picking randomly. Like I didn't really have a strong idea of what it would mean to go to, a private institution versus a state institution. And honestly, I think ultimately what ended up being the main driver for me was just cost. So I wanted to go to a good school, but in the end, it was the most cost effective to go to a state school as an in-state resident of Colorado. So I ended up at the University of Colorado at Boulder.
No, and I was very much the same way, similar, with regard to my family and higher education, and cost was a factor. And I looked at state schools as well. And I think it's really interesting that you said you were kind of applying at various places. I thought it'd be great to go to the University of Miami. I don't know, as a petroleum engineer, what kind of degree I would have gotten there, but it sounded really neat to go to school on the beach. But ultimately I ended up in the mountains in West Virginia. So, um, thank you for sharing that. Um, so you went right into your program at Colorado. And so how was it like going from a smaller area to Colorado's a very large school, not quite as large as UTK,
Yeah.
but it's a big school. So is there a little bit of an adjustment there for you?
Yeah, definitely. I Yeah, geez, now I'm trying to remember what it was actually like to be a freshman or a sophomore. It was definitely interesting. I think I had not anticipated there being so many different perspectives and viewpoints and personalities. So that was definitely a really big growth moment in my life, just having the opportunity to talk to, learn from, engage with a bunch of different people. I joined a bunch of student groups that I never would have had exposure to as somebody from the small town of Craig, Colorado. Um, yeah, I think I definitely, you go into university with like I'm going to be an environmental engineer and this is my goal and I'm going to do those things to accomplish that goal. But definitely there were a lot of opportunities just to, I don't know, expand what it means to have fun and like live a good life and meet new people also.
Yeah, I think my biggest adjustment was when I walked into my geology one class and there was 250 people in the class, and you're just kind of like, okay, this is different.
Yeah.
It's not high school anymore. But did some of those classes, or not classes, did some of those groups that you joined kind of help ground you and give you at least a firm footing, develop some peer groups and help you transition through that?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. yeah, have a lot of good friends still from my undergraduate days that I keep in touch with.
That's fantastic. And I think as you work through your environmental engineering degree, you know, you we not to bury the lead again, but you know, you ended up being an environmental engineer at
Mhm.
UT. As you began to approach graduating and you started that, do I look for a job? Do I go on to higher education again? What kind of walk us through your kind of decision strategy there?
Yeah. So I had an internship at an environmental consulting firm, basically the entire time that I was an undergrad. So I had a family friend who worked at a consulting firm, who linked me in, and so at the start, I was sort of running the copier and scanning books and doing just sort of like odd jobs around the office. But by the time I was a senior in my undergrad, they were giving me some more interesting, chemical forensic tasks, or looking at quantifying biodegradation rates for contaminated sites that our consulting firm was tasked with looking at remediation options for. And so I did actually have a job offer for that consulting firm, when I finished my undergraduate education. I had also, while I was, I think in my junior year, my third year at University of Colorado, I had done an undergraduate research project. So I was working with a PhD student there, and we were trying to quantify transport of colloids through streams in Colorado and looking at how acid mine drainage impacted the transport of those colloids. And I also thought that was very cool. So I got to spend a lot of time doing field work, collecting data, at different streams in the mountains nearby Boulder. And so I did, by the time I got to the end of my senior year, I had some research experience, and I kind of had an idea of what it would be like to go to graduate school, but I also had a little bit of work experience, and I had this idea of what it would be like to go and be, work towards being a practicing engineer at a consulting firm. And I think kind of on a fluke, I decided I should just apply for graduate school and see what kind of opportunities might come out of that. And so this time I applied with a little bit more, focus. I had some idea of the universities that I actually thought would be good universities to go to, and also nice places to live. And so I put in some applications. I got into most of the graduate schools that I applied to, but I only got a financial offer from one graduate school, and that was at Oregon State University. And so my options came down to, do I want to go to graduate school at OSU in Corvallis, Oregon? Or do I want to take this position at this consulting firm that I had been working at? I liked the people there. Obviously, I was going to make a lot more money at the consulting firm than if I was going to go to graduate school. And it really was kind of a toss-up for me. I think in the end, I decided, look, I think eventually I'll want to go to graduate school. I feel like if I go straight to working right now, I'm going to start making money. I'm going to start living more comfortably. I'm not going to want to go back to being, a poor college student eating ramen noodles every day. So I should probably just like get the graduate school out of the way with right now, while I'm still, acclimated to living without very much financial income. And so I decided to take the position at OSU, and yeah, moved to Oregon.
I think that's a pretty real thought process there, and I think a lot of us try to wrestle with the pros and cons of when is the right time to go to graduate school and versus enter the workforce. And so I appreciate you sharing that. And moving to Oregon from Colorado, essentially, where you'd been basically your whole life, was there an adjustment there, or did you hit the ground running?
I think the biggest adjustment is just in the climate, which sounds like maybe it wouldn't be something that you have to consider that much, but it is quite rainy in Oregon. And it's like more humid, and just the environment's a bit different. I remember I brought my parents out to Oregon, and I think my dad complained like he couldn't see the horizon line. There's too many trees here. It's just too green, you know? And so that aspect was kind of interesting. But I now, having, lived in Oregon, or having had lived in Oregon for 5 years, I absolutely love Oregon. I think it's so pretty, it's so gorgeous. It is a very different sort of environment than the kind of arid, quasi desert that I was from in Colorado. But yeah, I
Well,
don't know. Oregon's very nice.
so you're at Oregon State now, and you're doing research, and I'm guessing now that you're going from more of basic applied learnings to actually now doing a basic research. And so, how was that changed? Did that kind of scratch the itch that you might have had in environmental engineering as a new challenge, or was was that something that you didn't enjoy?
I think I did enjoy it in the end. It is very challenging when you start doing research, because there actually is no correct known answer. Like, as an undergraduate, as a student, there's a right answer, and you just have to figure out what that right answer is, right? And so you learn skills for how to solve problems, but you always know that there is a correct answer at the end of the tunnel, that if you can figure out the way to get there, you can figure out what it is. And sometimes in research, there is an answer, but nobody knows what it is. So there's nobody to tell you, yes, you got this right, or yes, you got this wrong. You have to build enough lines of evidence to be able to make an argument to support your hypothesis, or otherwise, say, okay, actually my hypothesis was wrong. But you have to kind of develop this all yourself. And I think when I started graduate school, that was very challenging for me. I think that's challenging for a lot of graduate students.
It,
We like
that
to,
open-endedness of that is
yes,
is really very different. I
yeah,
think you worded it very nicely. And so, master's degrees, you're approaching, that's the one thing, is you're working on your thesis, and then boom, you're getting ready to graduate, and you have that same choice again. Do I enter industry? Do I continue on? Was there any what drove you to continue on?
yeah. I think at that point, by the time I got to the end of my PhD, I really truly did. I really like research. I think it's fun. I learned to really like the open-endedness of it, and the ability to say, like, oh, this experiment didn't go exactly as I thought it would, but I've identified why, and now I can go down this entirely new pathway, and try to learn something completely, well, maybe not completely different, but adjacent to what my original goal was. And so I did really like that aspect of it. I had some opportunities again, so I applied to national labs within the United States. But at this point, I had also, because my PhD advisor was a very supportive, and I thought she was a great advisor in that she really encouraged us to go out and go to conferences, meet people, talk about our research. And she actually funded me to go to an international conference in Prague, as well as multiple conferences in the United States. At that point, I was like, oh, this is great. I love traveling and meeting all these scientists from different locations and just talking about science and engaging ideas. And so I started applying to like a bunch of places. I just expanded entirely. So I was looking at Scotland, I was looking at France, I applied in Australia. And so I did also have, some opportunities in the United States, but at that point I was really excited to like go out even further, and try to live outside the United States for a while.
So a leap from Colorado to Oregon wasn't enough. You
Yes.
ended up in Australia.
Yeah.
And so why Australia?
So I did have a collaborator in Australia who I had already worked with, and I knew I would enjoy continuing to work with. Australia also offered me, in terms of the types of projects I was able to work on, they offered me like the most open-ended project set, essentially. So The department that I went to work with in Australia it's an applied mathematics department, and they build 3D X-ray microscopes, essentially, so X-ray tomography machines. And they essentially wanted somebody to come and do cool experiments that would kind of test the limits of these machines that they were building and the algorithms that they were designing to collect data on those machines. And so they kind of essentially offered me a postdoc where I could do whatever experiments I wanted, as long as they were, new and cool and outside of what they were currently doing. And so again, I knew the people that were there were going to be good people to work with. And then I was really excited about this opportunity to go and design new experiments that had very little restrictions on what I was able to look at.
For someone who had just, maybe not just, but someone who loved research to kind of say, design some experiments to try to break our machines. Yeah. That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
So it must have been fun because you were there for a long time. And what kept you there?
Right. So it was supposed to be a 2-year postdoc. But near the midpoint of my second year, I wrote a grant application for an early career project from the Australian Research Council, from the ARC, and that was actually awarded. So that was a fully funded 3-year project. So I was there for 2 years as a postdoc, and then I got this 3 years of research funding to support myself. And then the department gave me a little bit of padding on either side. So in the end, I ended up being there for six years.
Fun. And where in Australia was that?
This is in Canberra. Canberra's the capital of Australia.
Sure.
Yeah.
I've been there on that little overlook that looks down on the city.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so at the end of that time, you're again, faced with a decision. Or is it industry? You have your PhD. You've been doing basic science work. Did you know that you wanted to go back to teaching and research, or were you still unsure?
Well, there was an intersection with the COVID-19 pandemic, and that did influence my decision-making at that point. So COVID hit while I was still living in Australia, just due to the restrictions around travel, mostly on the Australian government side. I found that quite difficult because I knew that I wasn't easily able to travel back to the United States and back to Australia. Mm-hmm. And so that did really influence my thinking. I think for a while I had thought, when I'm finished in Australia, maybe I'll go move somewhere else. Like maybe I'll move to Europe and try to find a job there. But yeah, because of the experience of going through COVID and being so remote and distant from my family, I decided, no, I want to move back to the United States and start looking for a job in the United States so that I'm at least on the same continent with my family and can more easily, maintain connection with them. So at that point, I actually didn't have a job lined up when I left Australia. So I came to the end of my contract in Australia. I decided to come back to the United States and moved back actually to Oregon and set up a base in Bend, Oregon. And then I spent the next year searching for a new position. So at that point, I was mostly looking for academic jobs at that point. So I wasn't really looking for industry positions. I was looking for something in academia.
And was that because of the research, the giving back to the kids? What drove you to academia?
Right. Yeah. I really like research. At that point, I didn't actually have that much teaching experience. And so I didn't have as much motivation for teaching necessarily. I was really focused on the idea of like, I want to build my own lab. I want to be the PI of my lab. I want to start training PhD students to run experiments that I think are going to be useful and helpful towards these applications that I think are important. So that was my primary motivation.
Interesting. And you won a couple awards while you were in Australia. Did that kind of help build your confidence, strengthen your confidence that the research was the right way, being recognized by your peers in that way?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you don't want to put too much emphasis on awards and things like that, but it is nice in its external validation. I think that is quite motivating. Yeah, gives you a sense other people also think this is important stuff to look at.
And so now you've landed at UT after your job search. And by the way, Bend, Oregon, not a bad place to set up a home base. And
Yeah.
look, from what I understand, I've not been there, but everybody who talks about Oregon says Bend is wonderful.
Yeah, Bend's so nice.
And so how is the adjustment now to having to build curriculums, teach classes? You know, you said you hadn't had a lot of experience with students, and now that's becoming kind of more of your formative base,
Yeah.
and then having graduate students on the other side.
Yeah, so I won't lie, the first year was quite challenging for me. I was very nervous about teaching. But actually it went pretty well, and I think all the students learned what I thought it was important for them to learn. And I think actually, because I was so nervous, I put a lot of energy into it, and I think the students also appreciated that. And now at this point, so I'm in the fourth year, so I've taught these classes a couple times previously. Now it's really fun. Like I get quite excited for certain lectures, you know, I'm like, ooh, today we get to do Navier-Stokes equations. This is gonna be great. We're gonna really blow some minds with the lecture today. And so now I find it really fun. I also I know this sounds, you know, teachers always like to say this, but I get really impressed with the students, and they're, you know, they come up with ways of phrasing things and with ideas and perspectives that even though I've thought about these topics over and over and over again, you know, for multiple years at this point, I am still surprised with the novelty of the perspectives that the students have sometimes. So yeah, at this point, I really enjoy the teaching for sure.
And certainly you have the teaching side, but again, the R&D side where you're still doing you're still writing grants, I'm sure.
Yes.
You're still bringing master's and PhD candidates through the program. How's that work-life balance, or excuse me, I should say, teaching research balance working out? How long did that footing take?
Yeah, again, a couple years to really get it into a place where I feel that I'm putting equal emphasis into the different aspects of the work. But at this point, I do have 4 PhD students. They're all making good progress. They're, you know, learning to be good problem solvers, and they're working through their projects more or less independently. And so that is also very, very gratifying to see. Yeah.
And so, you know, I think that all sounds pretty realistic to me. You know, I wouldn't think people would be able just to run right up and be able to send that flag up the flagpole, as it were. So I know a lot of the faculty that we've talked to on this, you know, there's an adjustment. It's you're used to, if you've been doing coding, you know, that's kind of a solitary thing, and then all of a sudden you're teaching that to kids. Has there been any real big surprises to you in your 4 years at UTK?
I don't know if I would call it a surprise, but it's definitely one of the key things that I think I have learned is that it's really all based on communication. Like teaching is communication, teaching undergraduate students, teaching graduate students, training my graduate students who are working in my lab, communicating really complex research ideas to other scientists. Like the core skill set that encompasses all of those is just having communication skills, learning how to describe a concept in multiple different ways so that if a person doesn't understand you the first time you say something, you know, maybe they will the second or third or fourth time that you articulate it in a slightly different way. And so, yeah, the continuous development or attempted improvement of my communication skills has been one of the things that I didn't necessarily realize I was going to spend so much time thinking about, but has definitely been a key thing in every aspect of this particular job. But also, I suspect other jobs as well.
And I think it's so great that you mentioned that, because that's one of the things I talk to people very early in their career path and say, look, you can be the best problem solver in the world, but if you can't communicate how you solve that problem effectively, it doesn't matter. You need to be able to do both. And so we're coming kind of to the end here. I have two more questions for you.
Okay.
The first, what advice would you give to either a younger you or a new student looking to come up through a similar career path?
I think my main piece of advice is if you want to try something out and see if you like it, try to find opportunities to do that. So find opportunities to do undergraduate research, or even, I have some programs that I do with high school students where they come in for a week and get to do like a mini week summer program where they get to experience some aspects of research. If you think you want to be a practicing engineer, go find an internship or, an opportunity to shadow somebody at their job so you can get a sense of what it's really going to be like to be in that position. And I think, I really didn't think I was going to go into academia when I started. Like, I went to school intending to be a practicing engineer out in the world doing engineering things, wearing a hard hat, that sort of thing. And it was only because I had the opportunity to experience doing research that I realized how much I really enjoyed it. So that if I hadn't taken that opportunity to have that firsthand experience, I might have missed this.
And the last question, Anna, and this is easy. What do you love about your job?
Ooh, what do I love about my job? I have to say, I think one of my top things that I really like about my job is just the people that I get to work with. I really like my colleagues. I like the other professors in the department. I like our administrative team that supports us. I like working with the students. I think the students are really smart, and I enjoy, getting to talk to them about the cool things that they're doing. So I think I really like the people.
Well, Anna, I really appreciate you taking the time today to sit down with us. I'd like to thank Assistant Professor Anna Herring, soon to, hopefully in 2 years, to be full professor, for her time today. Ryan, for producing this podcast. This has been a presentation of the ARI Podcasting Network.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to listen to new episodes of Stream of Consciousness, available on your preferred podcast listening station.